She started staying late at work, and there were messages on her phone that she quickly deleted. One night, she came home late, smelling of someone else's cologne. I tried convincing myself it was just my imagination, but something felt off. Her smiles were no longer meant for me, and our evenings had turned silent. That's when I decided to uncover the truth. Was it just her new passion project, or was there another man behind it? The first clues came from bank statements, expensive restaurants, gifts. But the worst was yet to come when I installed hidden cameras in the place where she spent most of her time. What I discovered turned my world upside down. Want to know how it all ended? Keep listening. Her hairdresser had been her lover for over a year, and I arranged an unforgettable meeting for them. Morgan sat in the kitchen in the morning with a cup of hot coffee, reading his emails. His wife Nancy was bustling around the mirror, getting ready to go to her favorite salon again. Her blonde hair already looked flawless, but she meticulously brushed every strand. Another visit to Travis? Morgan glanced up at his wife, who was intently fixing her makeup. Yes, he suggested trying a new coloring technique, Nancy replied, barely glancing at her husband. He said it's going to be something special. He's really putting in the effort for you. Morgan tried to say this jokingly, but a hint of irony crept into his voice. Well, he's a professional, she quickly retorted, putting on her coat. Don't expect me back before 6. We might stay late. We? Morgan asked, but Nancy had already closed the door behind her. He looked at the clock. Her trips to the salon had become more frequent over the past few months, and it was starting to seem odd. She used to joke that one visit a month was enough to look perfect. Now it had turned into an almost weekly ritual. Morgan set aside his coffee and picked up his phone. He knew he had a friend who could help him find out a bit more about this special salon. Jason, hey, I need your help. Can you look into a stylist named Travis? Nancy goes to him almost every week. I just want to know what kind of guy he is. No problem, came the calm voice on the other end. Give me some time. I'll figure it out. Morgan felt a slight relief. Although he didn't want to suspect Nancy of anything bad, his intuition told him something wasn't quite right. That evening, Nancy returned home earlier than she had promised. She looked happy, holding a new box of cosmetics that Travis had gifted her. Morgan noticed how she quickly tucked her phone into her purse when she entered the kitchen. You're early today, he remarked, trying to conceal the suspicion in his voice. We finished earlier. Travis had another appointment and was in a rush, Nancy replied, seemingly a bit nervous. I see. And what's that gift? Morgan nodded toward the box. It's just a sample. He says it's perfect for my skin type. She quickly explained and went to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. Morgan approached Nancy's purse, but her phone was locked. He opened his laptop to check the information Jason was supposed to send. After a few minutes, a message popped up on the screen. Travis has been working in your town for less than a year. Before this, there were scandals with other clients. I'll dig further, but this already looks interesting. The next morning, when Nancy went to the store, Morgan decided to visit the salon. There, he noticed Travis talking to another client, but his attention was drawn to a pair of scissors figurine on the table with a signature from Nancy, saying, with care, "Is this from one of your clients?" Nice figurine, Morgan asked with interest. Yes, she's a wonderful woman, and she gave me such a gift. Travis smiled, but there was something odd in his eyes. She's one of my favorites, he added. She really looks happy after your sessions. Morgan tried to stay calm. Of course, I do a lot of nice things for her. I see. Well, thanks for the chat. When Morgan got back home, he opened Nancy's laptop. In her messages, he found conversations with Travis, but they were superficial. Nothing explicitly suspicious, but enough to leave an unpleasant feeling. The next day, Jason sent new details. Travis had been fired from his previous job after complaints from the husbands of his clients. He would flirt with them, and even spent time with some. Nancy sat in the kitchen with a cup of green tea, her perfectly styled hair shining in the morning light. She always cared about her appearance, believing that looks were the key to success. Her husband, Morgan, a successful businessman and owner of several enterprises, was her source of inspiration. She often said she wanted to be as driven as he was. Lately, Nancy had repeatedly hinted at wanting to start her own business. Her dream was to open a beauty salon where she could not only implement her ideas but also inspire other women. She often discussed beauty industry trends with her new stylist, Travis. She started visiting him not just for new hairstyles, but also to talk about business ideas. "Morgan, I'd like to talk to you about something," Nancy said, sitting down next to her husband. Morgan put down his phone and looked at her. "What's going on?" "I have an idea that could be a great investment for us. What do you think about us opening our own beauty salon?" Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Morgan raised his eyebrows in surprise. "A beauty salon? Why that?" "It's a promising business," Nancy explained excitedly. "I know how to organize everything. And there's even a perfect location, the salon where Travis works." "Travis?" Morgan looked intently at his wife. "You've been going to him for months, and you never mentioned anything like this before. What's so special about that salon?" "He's a professional," Nancy replied with slight indignation. "Travis knows how to please his clients. He always has so many ideas, and the salon is perfect to get started." Morgan pondered but kept asking questions. "Why him specifically? There are plenty of other salons in the city. They also have professionals. For example, the girl who cuts my hair does a great job." "Oh, Morgan." Nancy winced as soon as she heard this. "Honestly, I'm not always a fan of how she cuts your hair. And you leave her such big tips for it." Morgan laughed, but his inner voice began to sound in alarm. Why was Nancy so concerned about his haircuts when she herself went to the same stylist every week? And why was she suddenly so passionate about the idea of buying that particular salon? Morgan decided to visit Travis's salon again. He was curious about what made it so special that his wife kept going back, especially since he already knew that Travis didn't have the best reputation. A few days later, Morgan decided to drop by Travis's salon. Disguised as a potential client, he walked in and asked to book a consultation. "Oh, it's you again. Am I right in thinking you're Nancy's husband?" Travis asked when he saw him. "Yes, that's me. She talks a lot about you," Morgan replied, carefully studying the stylist. "She's a wonderful client and very interested in the beauty world. We talk a lot, and I know she wants to buy this salon and improve it." Travis smiled, but to Morgan, his smile seemed overly confident. Morgan spent a few more minutes at the salon, but noticed that Travis's attention to detail, especially when he spoke about Nancy, went beyond professional interest. Travis came across as sly and somewhat odd. Returning home, Morgan decided to talk to his wife again. "Nancy, are you sure you want to buy this particular salon?" "Yes, Morgan. It's perfect. And Travis says it's a great opportunity." "You've been spending a lot of time there lately." Morgan couldn't resist asking the question that had been bothering him. "That's normal when you're dreaming about something and working toward it," she replied with slight irritation. The next morning, Morgan decided to dig deeper. Once again, he asked his friend Jason, who had experience with investigations, to check Travis's background and find out more details. A few days later, Jason called back. "Travis has an interesting history. He's worked in several cities, and every time it ended in similar situations. Women became infatuated with him, and their husbands started suspecting something. He spent a lot of time romantically involved with some of them. That explains why Nancy talks about him so often. This is starting to worry me. I need to be careful with her," Morgan muttered. Morgan decided to set up a surprise. The next time Nancy brought up the salon, he unexpectedly suggested, "All right, I'm ready to support your idea. But let's arrange a meeting with Travis and his colleagues. I want to learn more about the business I'm going to invest in." Nancy tried to come up with an excuse, but Morgan insisted. The following evening, Travis came to their house. "I'm glad we can discuss this in person," Morgan said, shaking his hand. They sat down at the table, but Morgan noticed that Nancy avoided direct eye contact with Travis. Her phone lay on the table, and at one point, it vibrated. Morgan discreetly glanced at the screen and saw a message from Travis. "You're doing great. I hope our plans remain intact." Morgan kept his composure and continued the conversation. He needed more evidence to fully understand what was going on. Travis looked somewhat flustered, but it wasn't unusual for someone working in the beauty industry, constantly facing financial challenges. Travis quickly began talking. "Morgan, you can't imagine how hard it is to keep the salon afloat these days. This old building, the staff who don't want to work. I've tried so many times to find a solution, but it seems like all my efforts are in vain, said Travis, sitting in a chair across from him. His face showed fatigue, but Morgan noticed he was trying to remain optimistic. Is there a way to fix it? Morgan asked, raising an eyebrow slightly. With his business experience, he couldn't ignore the recent changes in Travis's behavior, especially since he'd been spending more time with his wife, Nancy. Well, there is one idea. I spoke with Nancy. She wants to buy this salon and renovate it. You know how she's always dreamed of something bigger, a beauty salon. She's simply incredible, and if you want, I can be useful to her in this. I'll help with all the changes, advise her on what to do. Together, we can turn this salon into a true gym. Travis explained enthusiastically, glancing at Morgan as if he were a potential investor. Morgan smiled, but his inner voice began suspecting something was off. We need to have a clear idea of what kind of business this is, Travis. I'm not going to invest money in something that could turn out to be a failure. But why are you so sure this will be profitable? Travis pulled a few papers from his pocket and began explaining how the previous owner of the salon no longer wanted to invest in renovations and how the salon needed significant changes. New technology, an updated interior, and new staff. He detailed how the salon could become profitable and how Nancy could oversee its modernization. Morgan watched Travis, but he noticed how Nancy, sitting nearby, listened to him with fascination, her eyes sparkling as if this was her last hope. His wife had always been ambitious, but this time, there was something more in her eyes than just a dream. She looked as if she wanted to capture everything around her. We can do this, Morgan. Travis and I will handle all the work. You won't have to get distracted from your own affairs. We'll manage everything ourselves. You won't even notice when it all starts working, Nancy said, smiling, her voice almost sounding like a commercial for success. Yes, this will be a profitable investment for you, Travis added, almost bursting with enthusiasm. I'll keep helping Nancy with great hairstyles, and that's another bonus. The salon will gain popularity, and you'll make money. Nancy smiled, glancing at Morgan, waiting for his reaction. To Morgan, this sounded interesting but also suspicious. Travis was undoubtedly a cunning man, and his words sounded too good to be true. But Nancy seemed completely convinced this was the right decision. All right, Morgan finally said. I believe this could be a good investment. But I don't like how quickly you're proposing this, Travis. Are you sure it's going to be that easy? Travis just smiled and nodded. Absolutely. And trust me, Morgan, I'll support Nancy every step of the way. You'll make a profit, and I'll help ensure this salon becomes the best. Nancy was thrilled by her husband's decision, but Morgan still felt a sense of uncertainty. He didn't understand why this particular salon was so important to Nancy, or why Travis was pushing so hard for it. He didn't yet suspect that there was more to this story than just business. Nancy tried to appear carefree, but Morgan noticed how often she looked at Travis and how Travis occasionally smiled quietly, as if there was more between them than just a partnership. A few days later, Morgan agreed to finance the purchase of the salon. They signed the deal, and the business began to grow. But soon, Morgan started noticing strange changes in his wife's behavior. She became increasingly involved in working with Travis, and her relationship with him grew closer than ever before. She seemed more willing to leave everything behind for the success of their shared business. Morgan sat in the kitchen, looking at the clock. The evening was quiet, but the feeling of unease wouldn't leave him. He was waiting for Nancy to come home from work, but hours had passed, and she wasn't there. It began to worry him even more. She had become so distant lately. Deep down, Morgan felt something was wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what exactly. Their evenings used to be spent together, dinner, conversations about the day, about their lives. But now, Nancy was always busy, and he was left alone. A few days ago, she came home after work with a perfect hairstyle and looking surprisingly radiant. It was clear that Travis had some role in this. Morgan had long noticed that her attitude toward Travis had changed, but this time, something was off. Nancy walked into the room. "Hi, darling," Morgan smiled, trying to hide his concern. "Let's have dinner together. I ordered your favorite dishes. How was your day?" But Nancy responded in a way he didn't expect. "I already ate," she said coldly. Travis and I had dinner at a restaurant. It was delicious. Hearing this, Morgan felt his heart race. He couldn't believe they had eaten together. And without him. With Travis, he asked, unable to hide his surprise. Why were you having dinner together? Aren't you just business partners? Nancy froze in place, as if she hadn't expected the question. She nervously smiled and quickly changed the subject. Morgan, don't start. We just had dinner together. He invited me to discuss the salon. Nothing special. It was just a business lunch. Morgan couldn't understand why Nancy started speaking in that tone, and why she was so eager to explain everything. Don't worry, it's fine, she added before abruptly disappearing into the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. Morgan stayed in the kitchen, trying to collect his thoughts after the conversation. Something was definitely wrong. Just a few months ago, he and Nancy had dinner together, and he wouldn't even have asked such questions. But now, everything was changing. He increasingly noticed how often she went to meetings with Travis and how much time they spent together. Every time they met, Nancy looked cheerful, but her emotions didn't seem to reach him anymore. It worried him. Something wasn't right, and he felt like he was missing a crucial part of the story. Travis seemed to be becoming more than just a business partner. Morgan couldn't pinpoint exactly what raised his suspicions, but there was something in their conversations and behavior that gave him the impression that there was more between them. Maybe it was just his intuition, but he felt like this salon story was just a cover for something else. What worried him even more was that Nancy started receiving large amounts of money from him, and he had no idea how she was spending it. Travis was trying to manipulate the situation to gain full control of the salon. He didn't just talk about renovations. He repeatedly emphasized how important this business was to him and how successful it would be. He kept insisting that everything would look great if the plan went his way. Morgan doubted if there was more to Travis's words than he let on. Travis and Nancy seemed to have become a team. Nancy was gradually becoming more distant from Morgan, spending more and more time with Travis. She no longer cared about household chores, didn't help with domestic responsibilities, and spent most of her time away from home. Morgan felt increasingly lonely and sensed he was losing his connection with his wife. Now he understood that the situation was growing more tense. Something was wrong, and he decided he could no longer remain in the dark. Morgan began keeping a closer eye on Nancy, and though he didn't have concrete evidence, his heart told him betrayal was already on the horizon. One evening, Morgan came home earlier than usual after a long, difficult day. He inserted the key into the door, avoiding turning on the lights so as not to wake Nancy. Over the past few weeks, her behavior had changed. She had become increasingly distant. Morgan had long noticed that she was no longer the same as before, less attentive, colder. His intuition told him something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. Walking through the corridor, he heard voices coming from behind the closed door of the home office. That was odd. Travis and Nancy worked together, but he didn't expect them to spend time late at night. Pausing by the door, Morgan tried to discern what they were talking about. Light laughter and conversations, not just about business. Nancy was laughing, her voice sounding different than usual, and Travis spoke with a tone Morgan found unusual. Morgan could only imagine they were discussing some new ideas for the salon, but something felt off. He stood and listened, trying not to make any noise. It seemed they hadn't noticed he was nearby. After a few minutes, he decided to head upstairs, but suddenly, he heard the office door slightly open. His heart raced. He turned around, walking calmly as if nothing was wrong, but he waited for the right moment. Travis, maybe we should stop this? Nancy's voice came through. Morgan will be back. You know it's fine, Nancy. We need to see this through, Travis replied with a tone of confidence that slightly shocked Morgan. With a quick motion, Morgan touched the door and pushed it open slightly. Both of them looked at him in surprise. Travis instantly changed his facial expression, and Nancy tried to smile. Hi, you're back earlier than expected, Nancy said, her tone slightly different, but her gaze wasn't the same. Morgan noticed how quickly she lowered her eyes. What's going on here? Morgan asked, standing in the doorway. Are you two working so late? I didn't think you'd be here at our house. We're just... Travis interrupted Nancy and nodded, as if trying to defuse the situation. It's nothing, just planning a few new ideas for the salon. It's no big deal. You know how important it is to plan every step carefully right now. Yes, but why are you staying late, especially at our house? Morgan couldn't hold back the question that came to his mind. I understand that business is important, but this is too much. Nancy quickly raised her eyes, but her reaction was hesitant. She looked a little lost. Travis is just helping with the plans, nothing more, Nancy said quickly, as if trying to change the subject. Morgan, you know we're just business partners. You shouldn't worry. Morgan didn't look away. His heart was beating faster, and he felt that something wasn't right. His suspicions only grew, but he still couldn't say for sure what was happening. Why was Travis so adamant about minimizing everything that was happening? Why was Nancy acting so strangely? If it's just work, why are you two spending so much time together? Morgan asked, trying to stay calm. Nancy remained silent, not answering immediately. Travis stood quietly, but his expression became increasingly nervous. We're just working on an important project, Travis replied after a pause. Don't worry, everything is under control. Is everything all right? Morgan asked again, looking at Nancy. Her reaction didn't satisfy him. Yes, everything is fine. We just needed a bit more time to discuss things, she quickly answered and, without waiting for more questions, turned around and went to the bedroom. Morgan was left standing in the hallway, his thoughts swirling in his head. Travis was overly confident again. And Nancy? She didn't seem like herself. Why were they acting this way? What kind of manipulation was happening that he couldn't understand? Morgan sat in the living room, reviewing bank statements on his tablet. He noticed several unsettling details: expenses on fancy restaurants, entertainment events, and movie outings. The payments were for the same locations, cafes unrelated to business but rather leisure spots. What stood out most was that some of the expenses were almost weekly, all tied to Nancy. Morgan was confused. They had discussed their expenses at work, but he didn't like the idea of spending money on things clearly unrelated to the salon business. It seemed Travis and Nancy had more downtime than usual, and that worried him. These weren't business expenses. What were they doing together? He couldn't understand. The next day, he decided to bring it up, though he knew he didn't have enough evidence yet. Just a gut feeling. Nancy, I noticed some expenses for restaurants and other places, he began, trying not to sound too sharp. What's this about? Are these business-related events, or something else? Nancy looked at him, and he noticed how her expression quickly changed. She began to tear up, but quickly pulled herself together. It's all for work, Morgan, she answered calmly. Travis and I are trying to figure out how to not only provide haircuts and treatments, but also create something unique and exciting for our clients. We decided to visit a few places to see how others do it. Taking breaks is important for inspiration too, right? Morgan was puzzled. She sounded convincing, but something in her tone made him feel he wasn't getting the whole truth. She was undoubtedly trying to explain everything, but why Travis? Why him? That could be interesting, Morgan said, though he wasn't fully convinced. But I don't want this to go over budget. If this is all for work, why isn't it being accounted for as business expenses? Because, Morgan, this is just about improving ideas for future plans, Nancy smiled. It's nothing personal. We're just trying to be creative. Morgan dropped the subject, but his doubts only grew. Were they really spending time together just to improve the business? A few days later, Morgan, leaving work early, decided to walk through town and casually stop by one of the cafes where he'd noticed expenses linked to Travis and Nancy. When he entered, he saw them sitting at a table in the corner. They were seated close, talking, and it was clearly not about business. Travis and Nancy looked comfortable, even slightly relaxed. Nancy was smiling at Travis in a way Morgan had never seen before, and her demeanor was too natural for it to be just business. Morgan didn't approach them right away. He didn't want to intrude, but when Travis noticed him, his expression immediately changed. Nancy also hesitated, trying to act like everything was fine. Oh, Morgan, we didn't expect to see you here. Nancy tried to smile, but her smile seemed forced. You're here together? Morgan asked calmly, though he felt a certain tension. I thought you only talked about business. Travis, pressing his lips together, replied. Well, we talked and also took a little break. You understand, sometimes it's important to find inspiration to work better. Morgan watched them but didn't say anything more. He wasn't sure what he wanted to achieve from this conversation. The impression he got was stronger than any words. Travis and Nancy didn't look like people who were just working together. They looked like a couple. After leaving the cafe, Morgan felt confused. What did this all mean? He kept replaying the events of the past few weeks in his head. The unexplained expenses, strange trips, and meetings. Why was Nancy doing this? Why hadn't he noticed it earlier? Travis started showing up at their home, even after working hours. They discussed business details together, but for some reason, Travis's constant presence began to feel more personal than professional. Morgan grew increasingly doubtful but, trying to be objective, decided not to jump to conclusions. He convinced himself it was just a stressful period where it was hard to distinguish work from personal life. One evening, Travis was having dinner with Nancy at their house. It was normal for business partners, but the atmosphere wasn't as usual. They were drinking wine and discussing future plans. Travis seemed more open than usual, and by the end of the evening, he unexpectedly said, "You know, I really value working with you, Nancy, not just as a partner but as a person. You're so strong, intelligent, and I feel like our business is just the beginning. I'm truly glad we're together." Morgan noticed how Nancy smiled and gently placed her hand on Travis's. It was so natural, so romantic, that Morgan felt his heart skip a few beats. She had never been this open with him, even after all their years of marriage. "I'm glad we're together too, Travis," Nancy said, not taking her eyes off Travis, and her voice sounded as though there was more between them than just business. Morgan felt a heavy silence fill the room. Breathing became difficult, and he despised the feeling of suspicion that was growing inside him. To distract himself, he walked to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. "How about a drink? Let's celebrate the salon renovation," he suggested, trying to keep himself composed. Nancy and Travis didn't object, and they continued drinking while discussing their plans for the salon, but Morgan was no longer listening. He sat back and observed them, realizing there was something more between them than just business. As the evening drew to a close, Morgan felt the alcohol relaxing him, and he decided to go to bed. "I'm heading to bed," he said, standing up. "Good night." Nancy escorted him to the bedroom, gently running her hand down his back. It was unusual for both of them. She didn't usually show this kind of attention. Morgan wasn't sure if it was a genuine act of tenderness or something else entirely. Nancy left him in the room, and he closed his eyes, trying to push away all his doubts. But when he woke up the next morning, everything felt different. Morgan opened his eyes and felt a sharp headache. Reaching for the table to grab a bottle of water, he heard the bedroom door quietly open. Nancy walked in, looking relaxed, but there was something unusual about her appearance. She was without makeup and looked somewhat disoriented, unlike her usual self. "Good morning," she said, but her voice was different than usual. She seemed to be trying to appear calm, but Morgan noticed a certain uncertainty in her eyes. "Where's Travis?" he asked, realizing he wasn't in the room. Nancy hesitated for a moment before answering. "Oh, he left earlier, sometime in the middle of the night. We talked a bit more about work plans, and then he went home." Morgan wasn't sure if that was true. He felt something was off, but couldn't pinpoint what exactly. His head was pounding, but that wasn't the only thing bothering him. When Morgan got up to go to the kitchen, he noticed several empty glasses left from the previous night. The alcohol was wearing off, and he started to recall more details. Nancy began noticing that Morgan was paying more attention to her behavior. It became apparent to her when he asked her questions that wouldn't have interested him before. He started focusing on how much time she spent away from home and why she often stayed late at work. This made her uneasy, and Nancy realized her actions might be causing her husband's suspicions. To distract Morgan and avoid any uncomfortable conversations, Nancy decided to focus on their personal life. She began paying more attention to him, even trying to create a romantic atmosphere at home. In the evenings, she cooked his favorite meals, suggested spending time together, and even planned a few weekend getaways. "Morgan, why don't we go somewhere together tonight?" she asked one evening, trying to sound as pleasant as possible. "Maybe we can visit that cafe you like so much? It's been a while since I treated you." Morgan, though surprised by her initiative, agreed, as he genuinely appreciated that his wife was trying to do something for the two of them. "But we could just stay home, Nancy, and spend the evening together," he said, instinctively feeling something was off. "You haven't been home late for a while." Nancy quickly changed the subject, avoiding giving him more space to think. "Well, maybe I'm just tired. Work has been overwhelming lately, but everything will be fine. Let's just relax together. That's what matters most." Morgan nodded, but wasn't as calm as before. He noticed her nervous tone and felt strongly that something wasn't right. He couldn't understand why his wife had become so distant when their relationship had been solid before. Not wanting to spark conflict, he simply agreed. However, this didn't change the fact that Nancy increasingly thought about how to hide her relationship with Travis from her husband. She felt her life was becoming more complicated. Between work, Travis, and trying to maintain the appearance of a normal relationship with Morgan, she found herself in a serious trap. Nancy tried to appear more attentive to Morgan. She even started taking an interest in business details to give the impression that she was still invested in their shared endeavors. She often asked him about new ideas for the salon and planned how they could improve it, though most of these conversations were purely performative. This helped to slightly ease her husband's suspicions. "Morgan, what do you think if I came up with new service options for our salon clients? What if we launched special promotions for regular customers?" Nancy asked one day, sitting at the table when he came home from work. "I don't know, Nancy, it's possible, but I feel like you should focus on other aspects right now. Don't you want to take a break?" Morgan replied, sensing that his wife was trying to keep everything under control, but there was something unnatural in her voice. They sat at the table discussing possible ideas for future promotions. Morgan observed her more attentively, trying to understand why Nancy often arranged these work meetings with Travis. Almost every time they talked about the salon, Nancy tried to bring up their joint business and future plans. She chose her words carefully, ensuring she gave no reason for suspicion. One day, Morgan received a call from Lucy, Nancy's friend. Her voice sounded slightly anxious, and she asked to meet privately to talk about Nancy. This seemed a bit odd to Morgan, but he agreed, not suspecting anything and curious about what Lucy wanted. They arranged to meet at a cafe, where Morgan hoped to understand what was really going on. When Morgan entered the cafe, he saw Lucy at a table. She looked worried but still calm, as usual. She sat with him at the table, sipping her coffee, but she hadn't started the conversation yet. "Hi, did you want to see me for something important?" Morgan broke the silence first, unable to wait any longer. Lucy looked at him, carefully choosing her words. "Morgan, hi. I don't know how to say this, but something's wrong with Nancy. She's changed. I can't even figure out what's happening. How are things between you two?" "What do you mean? What's wrong with her?" Morgan asked, not understanding where the conversation was headed. Lucy glanced at him, somewhat embarrassed, and then began explaining how it all started. "Nancy and I used to go to the salon where Travis worked. I was the one who introduced them. At first, everything was fine, but then Nancy started acting strangely. I noticed she began canceling our usual meetups. She even told me to stop going to him for haircuts. And then, both of them started avoiding me. I thought it was nothing serious, but now I'm starting to wonder if there's something more between them. Could there be something going on? I knew Travis liked me before, but after I introduced him to Nancy, everything changed. His attention shifted entirely from me to her," Lucy added. Morgan listened, but his mind couldn't fully process what was happening. Lucy seemed genuinely concerned, and this made him feel uneasy. "I've noticed Nancy has become more distant. I thought it might be because of Travis, but I didn't want to think that there could be something serious between them. Maybe it's all just business?" Lucy sighed and continued. "Travis has always been a bit strange, and now Nancy has blocked me. I can't even call her anymore. She doesn't want to talk to me, and Travis has gone silent too. I don't want to lose my friend, but all of this seems very suspicious." Morgan started to feel nervous. He couldn't believe Nancy might be cheating on him with Travis, but his suspicions began to grow. He tried to calm himself, but it wasn't working. "Do you think they could be lovers?" he asked, trying to figure out if there was really something more going on between them. "Yes, it's possible," Lucy replied, her voice confident. "I don't know what to think, but their behavior has become very strange. She doesn't want to talk to me, and Travis has become even more secretive than before. Morgan felt his heart start to beat faster. He recalled everything that had happened recently, how often Nancy seemed more interested in the salon than in their personal life, how many times he felt her drifting away from him, and how Travis had become a constant presence in their lives. He had dismissed the rumors about Travis, but after Lucy's words, everything seemed different. I thought Nancy was just focused on work. I funded her purchase of the salon and the renovations, helping however I could. And now she and Travis are working together. I just thought it was all business. But now, I don't know what to think, Morgan said, trying to make sense of all these events. You shouldn't have given her the money for that salon, Lucy sighed again. I understand you want to believe it's just business, but from what I've seen and what's happening between them, it seems like more than just work. I didn't want to upset you, but I feel you deserve to know the truth. Morgan felt confused. He didn't know what to do next. He thought about how much he had invested in this business, in the salon. His feelings for Nancy started to change. He didn't know whether to continue supporting this or to address the situation he couldn't control. I don't even know what to do now. What if you're right? Morgan said, trying to gather his thoughts. You need to talk to her, Lucy replied. You need to find out the truth, or you'll never have peace of mind. If she's hiding something, you have the right to know. You think she'll just tell me everything? Of course not, Morgan said. Morgan knew he needed the truth, so he hired people to install hidden cameras and audio devices in the salon under the guise of regular workers doing renovations. Morgan sat at his desk in the office, watching another scene recorded by the hidden cameras in the salon he had financed for Nancy. This was the result of his recent decision to hire people to secretly install cameras under the pretense of repair work. At first, Morgan didn't want to believe Lucy's rumors about Nancy's possible affair with Travis, but his suspicions gradually turned into certainty when he saw footage that completely changed his perception of the situation. The camera showed an empty salon. The background was quiet. Only Travis and Nancy remained there after all the other employees had left. They stood close, talking at first, but their conversation soon became more personal and romantic. Morgan heard Travis tell Nancy that soon everything would be theirs, and that they could make a fortune with the salon. They spoke about taking vacations together, making future plans, and even discussed how much they didn't want Morgan to find out about their relationship. Then Travis and Nancy began romantically kissing and embracing. They looked like a couple in love. Is this their secret rendezvous? Morgan said aloud, even though he knew this wasn't just a coincidence. Everything became clear. He could no longer ignore the obvious. Morgan felt betrayed. He had given Nancy everything he had. More than just money, he had given her his support and faith in their future. And yet she had gone to another man. His heart beat faster, but it was filled with pain, not anger. His fury wasn't directed at Travis. It was focused on Nancy. How could she do this? He couldn't understand why she had chosen to betray him when everything seemed fine. She had received what she wanted. The salon, the money, the support. Morgan called Lucy on the phone. He needed to share this revelation with someone. Lucy came to his office, and they both sat, watching the same video and audio recording. They're just traitors. How could she do this to you? Lucy was shocked. The video she saw was as stunning as what Morgan had heard. They both sat in silence for several minutes before Lucy carefully spoke. I knew there was something between them, even if I couldn't be 100% sure. I'm so sorry, Morgan, but you need to show her what she's lost. She doesn't realize that a man like you could walk away. Morgan heard her words, and while they sounded cold and practical, he felt they were the only right course of action. He couldn't ignore this, and he couldn't let Nancy leave him without consequences. It hurt, but he didn't want to give in to emotions. I'll show her, he said, deciding that this time he needed to act. Morgan didn't tell Nancy anything. He decided to prepare a detailed plan for revenge. It had to be a calm, calculated move to make her realize why he no longer wanted to be with her. His plan was to make Nancy lose what she cherished most, the salon and him. Morgan sat at his desk in his luxurious office. He had been planning this for a long time. His final step to repay Nancy for her betrayal. He didn't want to act emotionally or harshly, but he was determined and cold-blooded. Perhaps this was the best way to show her that you can't play with the trust of those who care for you. Morgan invited Nancy and Travis to a party he organized under the guise of a presentation for the best beauty salons. He carefully prepared the venue, a luxurious hotel where he rented a large hall with a screen. This was the moment when all the guests would see the truth. The time has come, Morgan thought, watching as Nancy and Travis arrived at the event. When they entered the hall, the atmosphere was calm and relaxed. People were sipping cocktails, chatting, and discussing their salons, suspecting nothing. Nancy wore an elegant dress, and Travis was in a stylish suit. They looked like ordinary party guests. Neither suspected that this evening would drastically change their lives. Morgan stepped up to the microphone, and as the room quieted, he addressed the audience. "Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you could come. Tonight, we'll discuss the best beauty salons in the city and watch special videos about various projects. But there's one thing I want to show you, and it concerns my wife, Nancy, and her partner, Travis." Morgan saw Nancy and Travis exchange surprised glances, but they remained composed. All the guests' eyes were fixed on them. "Please, step up to the screen," Morgan said. "I want to show you something important." Nancy and Travis walked forward, unaware of what awaited them. Morgan pressed a button on the remote, and the first clips appeared on the big screen. At first, the screen showed footage of Travis taken at his previous salon. The video demonstrated how he flirted with married women, complimenting them and inviting them out for coffee after work. As the video played, the room began to buzz with whispers, the audience feeling discomfort and shock. Next, the screen displayed the footage Morgan had recorded at the salon. Travis and Nancy were sitting close, kissing, and discussing plans for the future. They talked about how they would develop the salon and deceive Morgan to take his share. "We'll do everything right, Nancy. This will be our salon, and he'll never find out there's anything between us," Travis said. Nancy stood there, pressing her lips together, her face pale. She tried to remain calm, but her eyes revealed that she understood. This was the end. "Well, there you have it, the truth," Morgan said, addressing the room. "My wife, Nancy, cheated on me with this man. They thought they could deceive me and steal what I built." The entire room was silent, all eyes fixed on Nancy and Travis. People started whispering and discussing what had just happened. "Now I'm taking full ownership of this beauty salon. I'll continue developing it on my own. Nancy, you will no longer be a part of this business," Morgan continued. "And Travis, you're fired. You won't be able to work in any salon in this city again. Everyone here tonight are salon owners. They've all seen who you truly are." Travis and Nancy stood motionless. Travis felt as though the weight of the world was crashing down on him. He tried to find words, but they wouldn't come. "Morgan, you can't do this." Nancy finally tried to protest, her voice filled with panic. "Oh, I absolutely can, Nancy," Morgan replied. "You chose to betray me and take what I built. Now it's all mine, and I'm leaving you with nothing. You've lost everything, and I will no longer be your partner." The guests in the room remained silent. Some looked stunned, others disappointed, and some began to realize that Morgan was right. Nancy stood with her head bowed. Her shock was hard to hide. Travis glanced at her in confusion but said nothing. "And one more thing," Morgan added, as the tension in the room grew. "I want you all to know that I won't let you manipulate my life or my business any longer. From now on, everything will be mine alone." Morgan paused and looked around the room. "I hope this serves as a reminder of how important it is not to betray or deceive. And now, let's return to working with real partners and professionals." Nancy and Travis became visibly nervous. Nancy started crying, and Travis simply abandoned her, leaving the event without a word. Nancy tried to repair her relationship with Morgan, but he told her he didn't need a wife who was a traitor. "This meeting will be our last," he said. Did Morgan do the right thing by taking everything from Nancy, or should he have given her a second chance?